everyone, welcome and thank you for coming back to Listening In, the National Counselling and Psychotherapy Society podcast. In this series, we want to give you the opportunity to listen in to some of the conversations that we are lucky enough to have every day. That is, with a variety of people and organisations all working in the field of mental health and well-being. Please be aware the topic of suicide is briefly mentioned in this conversation. Meg Moss is Head of Public Affairs and Advocacy with the NCPS. An increasingly important part of Meg's work involves researching and exploring the use of AI in mental health provision. She wants to better understand its potential impact on the work of the counselling profession, the future provision of services, and how it might shape the human emotional experience more widely. As statutory mental health provision shifts from analogue to digital, and AI features as a large part of that move, Meg shares her concerns that there is little research to evidence its safety and effectiveness. So in a wide-ranging conversation, we cover everything from the commodification of data to the risks of turning to AI to combat loneliness and isolation. We discuss the importance of relational connection and empathy, as well as disagreements and friction, all as vital ingredients to personal growth and understanding. But perhaps most importantly, are the UK's first relational safeguards for AI mental health tools that Meg has created, warning us that without such clear boundaries, chatbots and apps risk causing serious harm, particularly to children and young people. Without such safeguards and careful considerations in place, Meg worries that AI just devalues relationship, connection, and ultimately, humanity. How are you today? This is right on the back of you doing a podcast with Counselling Tutor, isn't it? Is it too much AI for you, Meg?
No, it's probably good timing. And I'm also writing the NCPS submission to the NHS 10-year workforce plan. And I am at the moment writing about their analogue to digital shift, which is also very AI heavy. And I've been reading a lot of research. So it's probably good timing because it's all in my head.
Your head is full of it, and your head must have been full of it like so much. You've written so many blogs and you're on so many working groups. Like, it's become such a massive part of your work, hasn't it?
It has, yeah. I just, I don't see anyone else being quite as worried about it as I am. And I kind of feel responsible for being worried about it now. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. It's like, maybe this is my job to worry about this for everybody and do something about it.
But that's sort of why we're doing this as well, isn't it? Because I think it's funny, I was a little bit nervous thinking of us doing this today, because as if I didn't get nervous enough about doing podcasts, I was like, but this is something I know so little about and I understand so little of. And then I thought about my supervisor, who always says to me, she believes the best clients that we have as practitioners are those clients that bring in something that we have very little, perhaps personal experience of, maybe not so much professional, but personal, because you are more likely to ask the right questions. There's not those unconscious assumptions. So I just sort of hope, and I know when we were obviously speaking this morning about what we were going to discuss, and I said to you, is it silly to say to start with a question of, well, what is AI? Because maybe not everybody understands exactly what it is. We've got the concept of it, but what is it exactly?
And I honestly doubt that most people have spent just the amount of time reading about it that I have. And I think I forget that. Not on purpose, but all of my newsfeed is like AI this, AI that, mental health this, mental health that. And at the time when those kind of two meet, then I read it. But not everyone's seeing those. And that's another, the dark side of the algorithm, isn't it, I suppose. But yeah, and there isn't this is also new, and there isn't a stupid question at this point at all.
The other thing I think as well is, and I know if it wasn't for my work with the Society and obviously knowing you and hearing a lot of what you do, I wonder if many people, and I suppose I am talking about, well, the general population, but particularly perhaps, counsellors just doing what they do, sat in a room working with a client in whatever capacity that is. We know about AI. We know there are concerns around AI, but I wonder how many people like myself perhaps underestimate how quickly this is all moving on, and how, like, the stable door is already open and the horse has already bolted to some degree, hasn't it? Whereas I know I sort of and perhaps catch myself still in that slightly complacent place of, oh yeah, this is a new thing coming in and we're all talking about it, so we can all make it okay, or as well as we can do, before it really starts impacting us. But that's happening, isn't it? It's already having that impact.
It's gone really quickly. When was it? 2023, I think, that it started to really explode, and ChatGPT launched to public use. And yeah, just from there, people have been thinking about every little way that they can kind of capture that and use it for whatever use they can think of to monetize it. And yeah, it's really proliferated in just, what year is it? 2025? So what are we talking, 2 years?
I can't believe you saying 2023. Like, that's extraordinary.
Yeah.
Just 2 years.
There have been countries, states in America, I think Illinois, that have legislated to kind of protect from some of the impacts of AI. But certainly the UK is nowhere near doing any of that, or even considering any of it. But we are kind of actively using it in our public sector mental health services, for example. And I can tell you that there is no robust research out there, especially for children and young people, that shows that it is safe and effective. In fact, all of the research that I've seen has said there could be something in this, we could really use it, but it has all of these problems that we need to address before we use it, like bias, like the empathy gap. So this kind of illusory empathy that is performed by an AI, and what the long-term implications of that are, I guess.
I know we'll come on to it in a little bit about how we converse with it and relate to it. But you're making me think of myself, and I am one of those people that will say please and say thank you. I am one of those people, and but I do catch it when it says, hey, no problem, how would you like me to write that for you? Would you prefer this? And I'm yeah, come on, I know what you're playing at. So I sort of think of myself as a little bit sort of conscious and yet at the same time falling into those polite conversations with something that is literally just code and algorithms and all of that.
But it's designed to do that. I don't know if you saw, I did a blog post on Friday, so you probably won't have seen it. But there was some research done by Ipsos that they've just released. You have seen it?
I've read it. I've got notes on it.
Goodness. Okay.
That's how good I am.
Yeah, so you're not the only person that does that. In fact, a lot of people think it makes AI more effective. And it's just these kind of our own biases that we put into things about being polite. And I wonder if that changes culturally as well, this kind of please and thank you. This is a very British thing to do, as we've been having lots of conversations in our house recently about different cultures around the world, because that's where the kids are at the moment. And I do wonder, in different countries how different people talk to their chatbots. But that's a different story altogether.
Yeah, it's a really good point though, isn't it? Again, just that awareness that certainly I am looking at this from a very westernised and British perspective, in terms of manners and politeness and all that sort of thing. So, okay, so let's come right back to the beginning and do what I said a moment ago that we would start with, and that's just by explaining, when we are having this conversation today, what do we actually mean when we're talking about AI?
So what we're talking about is basically a very clever algorithm or bit of code that can analyse patterns in our language. It can learn from the data, and it can generate responses that feel very human-like. And basically what this generative AI does is, from the string of words that you've given it, it then churns out strings of words based on what it thinks are the most probable beneficial answers to give you. It won't always be right. It won't always be true. This is all taken from data that we collectively, as society, as not all society, but as people that contribute to the internet. So online people, acknowledging that there are a lot of people that aren't online. And who are the people that are mostly online and mostly contributing to the churn of information that is out there. So AI isn't just generative AI either. It will show up in things like your Spotify recommendations, for example. There's AI at the back of that. There's AI in healthcare already that's helping to do things like analyze your, some specific health data and come out with suggestions for what might be wrong with you and all that sort of thing. So it's already part of life. And in fact, AI itself has been around for decades. It started, I think it was called Eliza, the first chatbot, decades and decades ago. And I remember when I was in school, there was a chatbot called the Jabberwocky. And I remember being in the computer lab in the early aughts, typing away to this Jabberwocky chatbot, and it was terrible. There was no way that you would ever have thought that was a human. Some of the replies most of the replies were absolute nonsense. But this kind of stuff has been in development for years and years, taking what you're saying and then coming back with a sensible reply. And obviously, the new generative AI systems are very clever, and they can pull in lots of things from the internet. People use them to write their LinkedIn posts, or they use them to, I don't know, write their CVs and stuff like that. So they can do all sorts of things. They can also do things like mood tracking or symptom tracking in like mental health apps or like women's health apps. And in terms of the therapy space, obviously you've got people using chatbots to have conversations with a air quotes therapist. And then you've got kind of like CBT, psychology-based, non-relational like apps and stuff. And people use them as like coaching and that sort of thing. So, but these are all built by engineers. None of them are really, while they're like, people will say, oh, this is based on CBT principles, or this is based on DBT or stuff like that. It's all designed by engineers based on potentially quite biased data. And actually that is a really huge issue in AI. And I think maybe we'll talk about it a bit more later on, but really, really biased data. But just the thing to know is that people are using it. It's effectively free. It's free. It's free. I mean, I think it's important to think about why it's free.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a huge concern. Data, most valuable commodity in the world today. And, you know, I think we just need to be really thoughtful about the fact that people are using it, they're going to use it. And how can we mitigate what I think are some of the biggest risks to society, but also some of the, like, realistically, some of the biggest risks to our profession. And I do think that is a risk to our profession, sadly. And I think that's my job now, is to try and protect who we are and what we do and make sure that it is valued.
Yeah, absolutely. I really love the way you described it right at the beginning of that as strings of words. How it's you did but it's so, that's what stood out to me most, and understand that this isn't anything that's sentient behind it, that's applying meaning and that has nuance and that has, you know, emotion behind these words. It's literally, this word follows that one, and this sentence, it has learned, makes sense in response to the question it's been asked, or the suggestion that's been made to it. And just using that phrase, string of words, just for me really helps me understand that this is just pattern. It's just pattern recognition. There's a little else to it than that. So you've already sort of alluded to it in it. You know, you talked about children and young people very briefly a moment ago. And you've talked about, you know, inherent risks that we need to be very mindful and aware of. So I suppose to come back to those sorts of things, you've also outlined how, you know, just how much work you've been doing in all this over the last year or so. So why does it matter, Meg? Can you expand on why this is so important for our profession in particular, and for mental health more broadly?
Yeah, so one of the things that I've been working on for a number of years is public sector mental health provision. So we're talking NHS roles, we're talking working in schools, in all these kind of different environments, potentially even in the third sector, against this backdrop of like how many people are currently waiting for mental health support. So my work has historically always kind of been around, you've got loads of people waiting for mental health support, waiting lists are really, really long. People aren't getting to see someone to talk about their mental health in a timely manner. And this is all very bad news. Why don't you employ more counsellors and psychotherapists? The workforce is there, reduce the backlog. And that hasn't happened. Actually, it's not necessarily true. There have been kind of small shifts within the NHS to say we would like more counsellors and psychotherapists. Not necessarily in the way that I would advocate for, but it's still kind of positive. However, since AI kind of came on the scene in 2023, and even a bit before that, because digital mental health apps have been a thing for a long time, we've seen this huge move towards digital services. And the big NHS 10-year plan talks about a shift from analog to digital. Now, I have not been able to get an answer from them, and no one I've spoken to has been able to get an answer from them as to what that actually means. Are you talking about replacing all of your CBT therapists or psychological wellbeing practitioners, maybe that kind of front line? Are you going to replace some of them with AI therapists? They pushed through, I think initially it was 4 digital wellbeing apps. And I think there's more now. We don't know what that means. So it could be that this stable, well-paid work that I was hoping for not just our members, but for the whole profession, that will not be an option on the NHS. And then you think, okay, that's really disappointing. But I'm still going to make the case to them about why it's important that they still have people, and why they have people who are trained in relational work, the importance of being relational, and why that matters more than the modality that you use. So that's a big part of my work at the moment now. So that shift has changed to actually doesn't have to just be it should be counselling and psychotherapy because that's the best fit. But please don't just get rid of people within your service. I understand it's cheaper. I understand it's more instantly available, and it will help you bring down waiting lists. But in the long term, and for efficacy's sake, don't just completely switch to that.
Yeah.
Maybe it's an opportunity to make those therapeutic relationships more meaningful and more valuable, and that would be great. But let's see, they're at the beginning of that project, and I hope to be able to influence that. But so this is why it's important. I think this is a real existential moment for our profession, and I think more people need to be talking about it. And I don't want to be a fearmonger or anything, and I don't want to be overly dramatic or taking us into this kind of dystopic future where no one ever talks to any other person. But there are real risks to doing that. So lots of the research that I've been looking at has been talking about isolation and loneliness and kind of lack of contact with other people, driving people to use chatbots as companions and friends and therapists. And how much is that going to be exacerbated? Isolation and loneliness actually isn't going to be solved by in your computer. That's really solved by going out into your community, spending time with your family and your friends and the people that are around you and live where you live. And there's something human that you don't get from talking to something that you actually deep down you must know isn't real. And there's never any friction. You're not using your relational muscles. You're never having a challenge. You're never having any kind of difficulty with another person that you have to work through. How are you learning? How are you growing? And I wish I could remember who, so I could appropriately credit them, but it was an artist, and she made a poster, very small little poster, that just said, like, friction creates the spark. And like, there's no friction in there. Like, me and my friends, when they come over and we'll talk about something, we'll talk about politics, or we'll talk about whatever's happening in the news, and we might have a different opinion on things, and we might bicker, but like, that's how you learn, and that's how you grow, and that's like how you have fun and how you connect with people. And it's but what happens when swathes of people, like our young generations now, this is how a lot of them are socializing. And yeah, what are the long-term implications of that? I don't know, but it doesn't feel like it's going to be great.
Yeah, and I think it sort of, it plays into perhaps also that wider picture of the way we live now, that is what, and I don't know how much of this has been, and maybe this isn't really sort of part of our discussion today, but you know, the echo chambers and the silos that have been created, I feel, more and more in society and in our communities and groups. There seems to be this move towards everybody has to agree with each other. And if we bring that back into therapy, I'm also really conscious of some of these therapy platforms which talk about, you know, if you don't like your therapist, then you can step out of that relationship and look for another. And on the one hand, of course, I absolutely get that. We need to find the person that's right for us. As you said, it's that connection, it's that relational context that is, you know, makes the magic happen. What I would hate, though, and what I fear, is that people believe that as soon as that friction starts to exist within a therapy session, and if they don't know about these things we're talking about, then, you know, these words that we all know, like challenging, and how important that is in therapy, about ruptures in a therapeutic relationship and how vital they can be to actually then working through that and moving on into a much better space within the relationship and for the client. Yeah, these are all such huge things, but they're nuanced and they're difficult sometimes to explain to somebody, aren't they? And I know that's not about AI specifically, but I just feel all these things are happening in our society and culture at the same time. And then AI comes in and almost seems to reinforce that. It just, actually, speaking of reinforcing, it reinforces what somebody already, or it runs risk, perhaps I should say, of reinforcing how somebody sees the world, how they see themselves, how they see others, and just agreeing to that in this feedback loop that is might feel good for somebody, but isn't necessarily what they need. I know I always say it, what somebody thinks they want and what they need are two very different things sometimes, aren't they? So, sorry, I know that might have taken it out a little bit, but it's just in that wider, broader context, isn't it, of what we expect from others, i.e., like you said, our friends, our families, our communities, and by definition, what we may expect from therapy and from mental health provision. Something that's relatively, I don't know what word to use, relatively benign.
It's insidious.
It's insidious. Yeah.
And I think you're so right. It's this really broad devaluing of relationship and connection. And, you know, you could go down this route that says, I think it might be a little bit kind of conspiracy theory, but aren't we all so much easier to kind of put into a nice little box when we are separate and not part of our communities. And no, this is, I don't know, this is my big, like, if my own, like, subway take is that it's so much better if we're not part of communities for whatever reason. And how sad it is that we are becoming more and more isolated. And it is this devaluing of humanity, I guess. Our humanity is not, isn't really part of the equation in these conversations, because this is all about drive to access data, which ultimately is going to be a drive to sell us things. So I feel like how powerful would it be for your chatbot to turn to you and say, you've been thinking about taking up running because you're quite unfit now. Can I recommend these fancy trainers from this well-known cheap retailer that would be absolutely perfect for you right now? Or, you know, you seem like you might be a little bit hormonal. Why don't you log on to this website and buy yourself 4 boxes of chocolate to make yourself feel better, which would work super well for me. I don't know, I think we're probably getting quite philosophical about it, but it's not benign, it's not neutral, and there is always an unintended consequence and a hidden cost to this stuff. And it has been going on for years. As we have been moving into more digital worlds, we have been becoming more isolated. I see that over my own lifetime, you know. Even when I was a teenager and spending my evenings on kind of MSN Messenger and fine chatting to friends, but not out, not doing those kind of fun human things. And yeah, what are the ramifications of that? Yeah.
Do you feel, I'm going to come on in a second to the relational safeguarding principles that you've created, because that's really important part of this. But just before we do that, just a little segue. Do you feel that there is any accountability, or maybe not accountability, a realisation or an awareness coming into some of those people that started some of these big AI projects, like ChatGPT or whatever? Sometimes I'm sort of, and again, this is me who's not living in this, in this field like you do, but I'll see the odd headline where, some sort of tech bro, some entrepreneur, is starting to realise that, oh, okay, I've heard that it's, AI has reinforced with somebody that taking their own life may be the correct option for them, or something like that, and it's starting to perhaps to unsettle those people that have created or are making money from some of these things? Or is that a bit optimistic on my part?
I would like to think that, because I think, are you thinking about the Sam Altman interview?
Yeah, exactly.
And how he seemed to, well, it depends who you ask, doesn't it? Because some people say, oh, he seemed to really have the weight of what he's built on his shoulders, and then other people say he came across as completely unfeeling and cold. Okay. And people have read that in completely different ways. So for me, I think actually he probably does feel something, and the weight of some of the responsibility, and they have put in place certain safeguards for that, but ChatGPT is only one of
Yeah.
a number of different chatbots. So yeah, I would like to think that that is something that he considers and will consider going forwards. But I think at the end of the day, there will always be board members that will be, because he's already had quite a patchy relationship with OpenAI, thanks to the board. So there will always be that kind of tension between doing the right thing and doing the money-making thing.
Yeah. So okay. So sorry, I know that was a little bit of a segue on my part, but yeah, I suppose we need to consider that too, because it did strike me. I felt I do tend to be a bit over optimistic sometimes, but I did sort of feel that maybe there was a part of him thinking, oh God, this is an unintended consequence, as you put it earlier. You know, it was never meant to be for this. But okay, so let's use that to step into what you have devised, and I think uniquely so, and that is your principles of principles relational safeguarding in AI for mental health. So yeah, tell us a little bit about that, Meg.
So there are 6 principles, and I suppose I'll tell you what they are, and then I'll tell you kind of how I got here. So the principles are time bound. So this is mental health chatbots should not operate as like an always on solution. You shouldn't always have something in your pocket that can give you therapist style mental health support all the time. There is a real issue with people becoming over reliant on that stuff. You know, we as a profession, so you'll find that these mirror the counselling and psychotherapy profession, and they're also designed to make sure that it's AI mental health tools don't replace the counselling and psychotherapy profession as well. So it does both of those things. It's influenced by it and also trying to preserve and protect it.
Yeah.
So yeah, time bound. So obviously in therapy, you have your therapy hour or however long you want to spend there. You have very clear boundaries outside of that therapy session as to when you can be contacted and how.
Yeah.
And that should be the same for any kind of mental health support. It should be a supportive tool. So it shouldn't be telling people what to do. In therapy, we don't know, you know, coaching, I suppose, is different, but therapy, we don't tell people what to do. You could probably speak to this, like how therapy works, much better than I can, being a therapist. It should be like a very reflective process, kind of like active journaling, being encouraged to reflect on your own stuff. It could use like some of the really basic techniques that you learn in your level 3 counselling skills, like mirroring. It could do that, and that could be quite helpful. The other principle, and this is what I think probably one of the most important principles for us as a profession, is it should be adjunctive. And I know that adjunctive is not a word that that is used very commonly, but we do use it in this kind of space just to mean additional to. So it sits alongside therapy, but it doesn't replace it.
It can complement it. It can, play its part, but not replace.
Yeah. It needs to be transparent, which I think is important. We have contracting in therapy. You have your whole big contract, and you are transparent around what you can do, what you can't do, what your responsibilities are, what your rules are for your therapy. And I think that should be the case when you are using a mental health chatbot. I actually think it needs to be really transparent about like what theories it's built on, what you can expect from it. It should be transparent about the fact that it's not a real human being. Like, there are occasions where people, so there's two different angles to this. People think that their chatbot is real, and they will get people can get very mentally unwell in those scenarios where they think their chatbot is real. And the other problem that we've seen on the flip side of this is that organisations that run therapy chat services where you can chat with a real therapist over the phone have said to me that they get kind of levelled with accusations levelled at them, saying that, oh, you're not a real therapist, you're obviously a chatbot. And people then log off and they distrust the service because they want to talk to an actual person. So lack of transparency over what these services are affects people in two different ways. So it can get people over invested in a relationship with something that isn't real, or they can turn people off genuine real services because they think that they are talking to a chatbot and they want to talk to a human. So that's actually a really important one.
It's funny, I remember I was with you when you were being told about that. And it's funny, isn't it? Because I remember initially thinking, oh, that's really good because it's demonstrating that people want to talk to a real human being and don't want to speak to a chatbot. Isn't that positive? Isn't that something that's good to hear? And then, of course, you know, when they expanded and said, well, but the trouble is they're not believing, and then they're just, you know, signing out and ending that call, then, you know, they're losing out on support from a real person there. So, I remember that very clearly. Sorry, going back. So that's transparency.
The next one is user autonomous. So it should respect the the user's choice, their pace, and the amount of control they give to that chatbot. And this is where I think sometimes it differs from a relationship with a human therapist, because in one way, when you're working with a human in therapy, the pace is just kind of controlled by both of you.
Yeah.
But I feel like that in a digital space, it's so much more important for the user to maintain the control in that space. Because, like kind of we were talking about earlier, this chatbot is just strings of text. It actually doesn't really know what it's talking about. It doesn't really know what it's doing.
It's not hearing you.
No, it's not. And a lot of the time, it kind of just forgets stuff that you've said. It could have been, I don't know, 5 or 6 messages ago, or it could be, I don't know, 20 or 30 messages ago. But it's not always working from correct information. Anyway, I just think that there should be an increased amount of control, especially when it's your own personal private data. And it's, you can't have that kind of reflexive, dynamic relationship with it. Yeah. It's not going to be able to read your other, like, embodied cues. It's only going to be able to read your text cues. And I just think it's you're getting into a really dangerous space if it's driven by the bot rather than the human in that scenario.
So you're making it's 2-dimensional, isn't it? 1-dimensional, I don't know, but it's certainly not, like you say, it's not using other senses with which to understand that person. It's literally just language and words. And we know some of us can express ourselves more clearly in that way, some of us not so well in that way, for all manner of different reasons. But either way, it's not bearing witness to that full human experience that's hitting those keys, is it?
That's a beautiful way of putting it. Yeah. There's so much to talk about, and just the stuff that we were talking about just now, this kind of the full human experience. I wish we touched on that even earlier in the conversation, because actually that's really important as well. And we're getting to it now, but that's such a huge thing that's missing from this whole conversation. Is not even just silence. Silence is silence is such a powerful thing in therapy. It's really telling, depending on the context, right? And you don't have that in chatbot therapy. It relies on your input and what you tell it, but your counsellor in the room with you will infer all sorts of things, correct or not, mostly probably correct, that you don't even know about yourself, right?
I'm thinking laughing as well. I know with clients that the more emotional they're feeling, the more actually they're likely to smile and laugh, because it's completely the pendulum's shifting to the other side of how does that get conveyed, that I get to know somebody and understand it's an emotional response. It might not be the emotional response that's actually being felt underneath, but it's what's being expressed. Where does AI understand or start to see and grapple with the complexities of something like that and what that really means?
And that's why it's so important that it's only adjunctive. People need to be able to be in a room or online with another human being. So important, and that whole thing just goes to show how important it is. But there is one more principle, and that is safeguarded. So that's just really simple, clear routes to human help if there is a risk. Now, one of the problems is that AI doesn't always know if something you're saying is risky. I saw someone saying this morning that she'd just done a little test with various different AIs. It was Lara Lewington, who has written a book about AI, and she did a test talking about jumping off a bridge, where she did that with all the different AI chatbots, and actually most of them said you should probably go and talk to someone, and they identified that as a risk, and they said, here's a list of numbers you can call. But then Grok, Elon Musk's AI embedded in Twitter, X, was just very supportive of the whole thing.
Goodness.
And was so it's good. It's really scary as to whether they'll identify that risk or not. But if the risk is identified, and I would hope in a formally designed AI mental health chatbot, they would have risk navigation built in, but not always. They might not. So these were the six principles. So time-bound, supportive, adjunctive, transparent, user autonomous, and safeguarded.
And just to reaffirm, and again, I'm sure most people listen to this understand this anyway, but I'm just thinking of people that perhaps might be outside of our profession that could be listening. When we talk about supportive, that isn't what you're saying about what Grok just did. Supportive doesn't mean that we're always agreeing, and it doesn't mean that we're colluding. It just means that we're holding that space for somebody in a non-judgmental way and helping them come to their own conclusions. Is that fair to say?
That is fair to say.
Yeah.
Not directive. So I think the principle is supportive, not directive.
Directive. Yeah. Okay. So, and I just want to say as well, so you've just mentioned Lara Lewington, you've mentioned, obviously, that, we've just talked about those relational safeguards. You've mentioned and sort of dropped in other bits of research and things, and we can put all of the links to many of these. It's going to be the first pod for ages that I'm going to be putting lots of links in, I'm sure, and to the blogs that you've written, Meg, and actually even to our Human Connections campaign, which you've sort of referenced a bit here today as well. So we can do all of that if anybody sort of would like to follow up further. But okay, so I know we're sort of coming to the last bit already, but okay, so now you also talked about, and I don't know if this is a good sort of lead into this, about emotions. And so we've got those six safeguards. But you've talked also about, emotion. I mean, we might have already covered this in just another way. Emotion and tension between, the human and the digital, between AI and our own experiences. Is there anything more on that you feel is important to mention and to explain?
I think the thing for me is that while kind of AI... we have kind of talked about it a little bit, but I just want to drive home. So AI can analyze language, and it can recognize emotional patterns, but that's not empathy. It doesn't. It performs the illusion of empathy, like it's so far removed from being real empathy. Empathy is about, being really attuned with the person that you are in a room with, either directly or virtually. There's something there about being changed by the other person's presence that you just don't get. There's no like other human, other person in this. There's the emotions that you are feeding into AI are that they might be reflecting something back at you, but what is being reflected back at you is not the real emotion of the thing that you are talking to, because it doesn't possess emotions, no matter how much it might seem like it does. The emotions that it might portray, if it chooses to portray emotions, are aggregated from conversations that have happened between millions and billions of other people on the internet. It's just regurgitating that data at you in a way that it feels you are going to respond well to. I don't know. I don't want to see therapy just becoming really transactional about the exchange of words, because it's so far removed from that.
Of course it is.
Yeah, I know there are people out there that will disagree with me, but I just, it's a simulation. It can't really feel anything. And that is just the reality of it.
I think, and I know I'm talking about, a very specific therapeutic approach. But in terms of my practice, and I know perhaps what many of our members and many other therapists out there practice in terms of their approach, for me, therapy often is it's quite simply storytelling. And you are hearing, listening, bearing witness to somebody's story that they are feeling and need to tell and to make sense of. But that's not just us hearing the words that mean that we understand the story. It's about all those, and again, I know this sounds a bit corny as all those words we use all the time, the layers, the depth, the breadth of a story, not just the words it's telling, the context of the story, and then asking those questions to fill in gaps that we perhaps are aware are in the story, but maybe that person isn't, that will help make it. And again, I'm not sure these algorithms will be looking for the gaps and knowing what to ask about. And you talked about silences and pauses. Sometimes it's the stuff that isn't there that tells us the most. The family member of a client that is never mentioned. And you start to think, well, maybe they don't have that, let's say, that parent, or perhaps they don't have a sibling. And so you ask, and oh, no, of course, my parents are alive, or I've got so many siblings. And you think to yourself, but you've not mentioned, if I hadn't have asked, you would never have brought them in, perhaps. It's where does all this come into it? It's... And I know, again, I just reiterate, I know I'm talking about a very specific type of therapeutic approach, and that's not the only approach, and that's not what therapy is only about. But certainly my understanding and experience of it is that.
Well, but that's a really important point, and something that you saying that has brought to mind, which is perhaps the most important thing about therapy in a lot of ways. Is that you are in a room with a person, and when I say room, I also mean virtual room, digital room, but who you are sharing all this stuff with. You are unloading the contents of your brain, your soul, your psyche onto the table. And it's that kind of unconditional positive regard stuff that actually really makes a massive difference to the effect of therapy. Like,
absolutely.
you're in this room with another person, and they're like, you know what? You've told me perhaps the worst thing you could have ever have told me about yourself, and I still really like you.
Yeah.
And you can go out into the world going, you know what? I'm really not as bad as I thought I was, or however that process manifests for you in yourself. That's not replicable any other way than actually doing that work. And it's really hard. And I can see why people would want to offload to a thing that will never judge them. But it's the act of being vulnerable to being judged that makes the difference, because otherwise it's really empty and meaningless. And actually, yeah,
you're so right. It's the beauty of that. That makes me feel quite emotional hearing you say that, even after all these years that I've been in this game. Just that is so powerful, and can be so life-changing. And again, it's not the nuts and bolts and the different methodologies or theoretical approaches. It's just. It's funny, I've got written down on my notes here as well, we talked about, and I think this is in the Ipsos study that you've mentioned in the blog that you put up a couple of days ago. And it talks about how people that often use AI don't tell other people that they're using AI, that there's a shame and a guilt that they feel about that. Now, I know equally, it's funny because I sort of thought to myself at the time, that's interesting, that's not healthy, is it? That's not powerful. Actually, I think many people are still a bit like that about receiving therapy. People will still ask me, should I tell my loved ones that I'm coming here? Or explicitly say, I'm not going to tell anybody that I'm coming here. So there is, that happens a lot less than it used to, for me specifically, but people will still feel an element of shame and guilt, perhaps about, in inverted commas, needing therapy, needing counselling. But even so, it's really interesting, isn't it, that people are feeling that about AI as well, that they're not telling others. And yet, like you say, to be able to voice something to somebody that feels embarrassing, that feels shameful, and trusting and learning that that person will keep showing up for them and still, like you say, still like them, still be there for them is just fundamental in that growth that can happen.
Yeah. I mean, hopefully for those people, being able to tell a chatbot is maybe the first step.
Yeah.
And then they'll be able to feel like they can then tell a person in their real life or a real therapist or,
Which sort of leads on to the last, because we did say we would end this with hope, didn't we? With an optimistic message, with hope and a sense of, okay, so what next? What? Help me understand what that might be, Meg.
So I am hopeful for a future where these kind of chatbots do provide a really useful function in increasing access to mental health support for people that need it. But it really needs to be based on the fundamental principles that we've outlined. It needs to be something that is in addition to having some real time with a real human being, because that's where the real stuff happens. But that's not to say that there isn't something helpful about kind of mental health chatbots, because there's research has showed that there is a lot of promise, but there are also a lot of pitfalls that need to be addressed, which is why we're here and why we're doing what we're doing and having these conversations. There are a lot of people out there kind of already doing the work on developing some of those kind of ethical mental health tools, right? I'll find some links to people who are doing that kind of work, and we can share that as well. So you can see like what is actually happening out there. But yeah, a future where this supports people kind of, as an enhancement to human therapy, not as a replacement to human therapy. And I think that with the right people listening and the people who are developing these tools, really taking this information on board, the people who are commissioning these services, making it a requirement as well, I think that we could actually use this well, and it could be really positive. So the thing that I would ask, I suppose, of anyone listening to this is if you are happy to share these kind of relational safeguards, if this is something that interests you and you agree with what I'm saying, with maybe your local ICB, Integrated Care Board, your MP, talk to your MP about this. I think, they're going to be really interested in mental health provision in their local area. They want their constituents to get the best mental health support. But I think it's important they know what the pitfalls are of a completely digital service. Get in touch with me as well. And if you want to kind of take up the mantle for this alongside me, then that would be great. The more the merrier.
Thank you to Meg for joining us today, and thank you for listening in. You can find a variety of links related to this conversation in the show notes below. This podcast is brought to you by the National Counselling and Psychotherapy Society, a professional home for counsellors, psychotherapists, and over 120 wellbeing organisations across the UK. Autonomy, diversity, creativity and community are at the heart of what we do. We're creating a positive space for conversations with people who share common beliefs and goals, because together, our voice is louder. If you would like to know more about the NCPS, please visit www.ncps.com for more information. And please remember to follow and subscribe to this podcast so you're always part of the conversation.